I see we have some people that are already joining us right now. We are going to get started in about a minute. As you jump on, you will see that there's a poll question up on your screen. If you could just take some time to answer that, it helps us prepare for our discussion later in today's event. Okay. I'm going to give people about 15 or so more seconds to get into today's webinar before I introduce the team member from Redaptive along with the webinar and kind of give you an overview of what today is going to be about. Okay. Well, I know we're going to have some more people joining, but thank you to those who are on with us already. My name is Jessica Hunt. I'm one of the owners of E&E Leader. We thank you for being on with us today for this webinar sponsored by Redaptive. We're going to be talking about how to scale sustainable facility upgrades and reduce energy costs. And I know you are here to listen to Lee and not to me, but I do want to go over a couple of items before I turn the camera and the mic over to him. As a reminder, all of our webinars are recorded, so you will have access to this event once it is archived by Zoom. Redaptive is going to be providing a copy of the slide deck today to all attendees. Once this event is over, you will hear from them within the next couple of days. So don't feel like you have to sit here and take notes. Listen, ask questions, be engaged as much as possible. We do appreciate it. There will be 2 other poll questions throughout today's event, so we appreciate your participation in advance. During today's event, Lee is going to go over some items before I jump back on and have a discussion with him and then answer as many questions as we can before our time is up. So at this point, I am going to turn the presentation over to Lee and I will rejoin everybody for the Q&A. And I'm going to leave our poll question up for a couple more minutes just as more people join. So thank you for being here with us, Lee.
All right. Thank you, Jessica. I appreciate it. And welcome to everybody. Thank you all for taking some time out of your busy schedules to join us here today. As a quick introduction for everyone, my name is Lee Tolbert, and I'm our Vice President of Program Development at Redaptive. I've been with Redaptive about 6 years now. Prior to that, in my former life, I was working in consulting for about 10 years and did a variety of things, as you could expect, in that capacity. Migrated over to Redaptive to really start focusing on sustainability and energy. A few kind of fun facts for you all. One is I'm an avid skier and an outdoorsman. I guess you'd expect that for somebody living in Colorado, but certainly enjoy doing that. And I had the fun pleasure last year of being able to take my first ski trip outside of Colorado, which was kind of a lifelong dream of mine, and got to do so with my oldest daughter, which was fun. And went up to Whistler, so fun to see a different space. And then lastly, a fun work-related fact. I was actually the first program manager for Redaptive as a consultant back when I first got engaged with us around the time of our founding. So I have a lot of background in both deploying programs as well as working with customers directly on trying to get things moving. All righty, well, thanks again for the time today. As I mentioned, we went through introduction, so I'll move on to the next slide here. So a quick background on Redaptive. So Redaptive was founded in 2015, and we since then have upgraded over 4,000 buildings across the United States, Canada, and mostly Western Europe. Additionally, you'll see that we have a very robust client base, particularly in commercial and industrial. So manufacturing being a very large part of our overall portfolio, which we'll get to in just a minute. As far as kind of where Redaptive is today, we have raised over $1 billion in debt and equity. And that means we have both project funding facilities as well as equity. And what you can see from that is a very large, portion of that is from very recognizable names in the marketplace focused on sustainability. So things in companies like the Canadian Pension Plan Investments, they are a very large investor in Redaptive, as well as Deutsche Bank, so you can continue to see where we're focused. As far as our manufacturing expertise, and again, I'll get into a little more detail in a minute, but I personally have worked with almost every customer logo on this page. Some of our biggest manufacturing ones being Avantor, Schlumberger, Goodyear, Halliburton, McKesson, and Berry Plastics. Moving on to manufacturing and Redaptive experience in manufacturing. As you can see here as a quick review, Redaptive has 19 major manufacturing clients covering nearly 2,000 locations across, again, the US primarily, as well as Canada and Western Europe. We have developed and deployed projects across kind of the energy spectrum. What that means is we've had lighting upgrades, HVAC upgrades, solar on-site solar installations, among many other things. So hopefully that kind of gives you a background on Redaptive and where we've focused and our relevance in manufacturing. Okay. So moving on to what you all, I believe, are here to listen about today. I wanted to start by kind of laying the background for manufacturing and the ways in which Redaptive looks at the industry and some of the things that we understand. So if you think about the challenges that you face in manufacturing, as it relates to sustainability, but more broadly from an industry perspective, there are a myriad of challenges that manufacturing face. And the environment for manufacturers, from our perspective and mine personally, is even getting more complicated. You think about things like the recent changes across a number of states for banning plastic bags, for example. That has a large impact, right, on a number of different manufacturers. That makes it even more difficult to achieve, what you need to on a sustainability side, but also just from a business operations perspective. So, some of the things that we see in the marketplace as far as broad challenges that the industry faces, right? The first is kind of tight budget allocations, right? So high cost, low budget, and it forces a lot on the energy side to be a run to fail scenario, right? And what that can sometimes even lead to is interruptions into the manufacturing process, right? If you have some part of your energy platform tied to production and something goes down, it has a possibility of interrupting your production. Additionally, we've seen across the globe, right, an increase in the price of inputs into manufacturing processes, right? So that's everything across the board has gotten more expensive. And there's obviously some cyclical nature to that, but there's a continued trend that since 2020 we've seen. So again, kind of reducing what you have from a budgeting perspective to anything that's not core. Third on the list here is kind of a lack of trusted resources and expertise, right? So everyone is focused on their kind of core business needs and a lot less, oh, sorry, I accidentally hit the slide, and a lot less on focusing on energy initiatives. lastly, a pressure to decarbonize, right? There's pressure across the board for manufacturing customers as well as everyone else to decarbonize and set real hard goals around that. And while, a few years ago, targets seemed pretty far off, now, right, you're seeing goals that were set for 2025 and 2030, which is quickly approaching all of us. So those are some of the challenges that we see. And this is where we'd like to introduce a poll question. Jessica, is that one up to you? All right, thank you. So while you all take a minute to answer this question, and hopefully you all can put some thoughts in there, I'd love to discuss those. One kind of thing I was thinking about while preparing here that I didn't put on the slide was, a big challenge that you all are facing in manufacturing is you have around the clock operations, right? And that in and of itself kind of creates some challenges that are difficult to allow you to implement any energy type initiatives. All right. And let's see. Jessica, should we give another minute or so for the poll?
Yeah, since it's an open-ended one, I would definitely say let's have our attendees have about another minute, about another
Great.
60 seconds to answer the questions. We appreciate those who have already answered, and then we will end the poll and go over them.
Great. Thank you. And just another kind of food for thought here on the last pressure to decarbonize challenge. One thing we've also kind of seen around the marketplace and some of our different customers, even outside of manufacturing, is, there's now some customers that we see that have financial penalties involved, whether that's specific to their executive team, right? And you've seen some executives with goals around sustainability. Some customers even have financial penalties from their investors or from their lenders if they don't meet some of the sustainability requirements that they put out there, some of the goals that they have set. So it makes it quite a challenge, really, to try to balance all of these things at once, in a way that a lot of businesses don't have to face in the same way that manufacturing does. Okay. Jessica, I apologize. Will those poll results show up here real quick?
You should be able to see them, but I actually will just read them to you
Great.
instead. So challenges, we have time, and I'll jump online because there's no reason for me not to be on if I'm talking. So time, reducing energy costs. It's tough since usage is fairly constant and doesn't have many peaks or valleys. Not the first time I've heard that one. Increasing mandatory reporting requirements, right
Mhm.
size
Yeah.
projects, sustainability reporting requirements that came up a couple times, finding viable and credible solutions for reducing energy consumption in buildings, and also finding capital for these projects. That's
Mhm.
everyone's concern. And then LCA accountability. So really some really good questions here.
Yeah, great. Thank you for reading those
Mhm.
off. Jessica, yeah, those are great, and all other ones that you have any of your peers likely or yourselves have addressed and had to deal with. The a couple of these we'll touch on here in just a little bit, particularly around the reducing energy costs, thinking about some of the mandatory and compliance reporting requirements, as well as kind of what are some of those viable and credible solutions, and ways you can get capital for these types of projects. So we will definitely get to a number of those items here in a minute. All right, thank you all for sharing. Very much appreciate it. So this slide is trying to really go through and demonstrate, what's happening in manufacturing and what are some of the energy challenges, right? The comment just now about, reducing energy costs and thinking about how sometimes those can be pretty consistent across time, right? You see that there's a broad number of areas that energy is consumed across manufacturing sites, right? And depending on the type of process you have, depending on what you are actually manufacturing, whether it's heavy or light, any number of things like that. Um, there are there are a number of different areas that we can attack. So, one of the most common, because you can do it in a way that's not as disruptive to processes that are happening in kind of the manufacturing cycles, is what we categorize as non-process energy, right? And then beyond that, you've got process energy. So that means tied to production itself, and then on-site generation, right, for actually generating electricity. So when you think about the areas to attack, what you can see here, right, is that it's complicated, and a lot of the energy in a building is tied up in a manufacturing building, is tied up in that process energy bucket, right? And you've got every single type of thing you can imagine, from process heating to compressed air to pumps, chillers, steam, all those kind of things kind of happen in the process energy. Additionally, right, you have a number of areas that you can address quickly and easily that are in the non-process energy side, right? So things like facility HVAC, lighting, on-site transportation, and other non-process energy consumers that can be addressed. So when Redaptive is looking at this, and when you're thinking about how do I address energy consumption across my facilities, you really have to look at all three. And I think there's still a lot of opportunity in the industry to look at legacy equipment to help with the data reporting challenges and help enable some of those corporate sustainability initiatives. Last kind of comment here, just for us to think about as we're continuing to talk today, is when you look at these kind of three buckets, what I've often seen as well is you sometimes end up with kind of competing priorities, right, and competing objectives between these buckets that make it hard sometimes to address them. So, for example, you might be looking at a process piece of equipment where you've been asked to increase production, so you're inherently increasing the energy usage, where then on the flip side, you're trying to reduce your overall footprint, right? And it's hard to do those two things at once, which is why we're talking today. All right, moving on to the next point here. So on the topic of objectives, and a little of that came up in the poll question on the 2 slides ago, but some of the common objectives that we've seen and what we're continuing to see with our manufacturing client base are listed here. So the 4 we kind of started with are, one, saving on energy, right? So that one's pretty straightforward, but how do I find ways to reduce my consumption, whether that's electricity, gas, or water? All of those need to be addressed in order to make a meaningful impact. right? And then on the downtime front, so how do I maximize my production and reduce any downtime? A critical kind of business goal that needs to be achieved. ROI, how do I continue to prove that there are positive generating projects, positive ROI generating projects that I can attack? And then lastly, the sustainability objectives. And again, that focus and pressure on all of us in our corporate organizations that we have as far as goals that are being pushed across the board and continue to be focused on by investors. All right, so here's where we'd like another poll question. Would love to hear from you. How do you relate to these objectives? What else are you trying to achieve that maybe we didn't talk about here? Another area that again kind of came to mind for me as we were looking through this is, safety and EH&S is not something that we listed here, but I think is an objective that most of our manufacturing customers see and need to address, whether or not that's a formal corporate level goal, or if it's a location by location goal. That's something that's always on the mind of a number of our customers, and it certainly impacts how you address sustainability projects across a number of locations. And as you're continuing to think about this, I would say, don't be shy on things that might seem a little bit off of the beaten path, if you will. We know and have seen that there's a huge amount of variation, right, across individual organizations and our manufacturing clientele just themselves. So, don't think that there's anything you have that's an objective that is really off the table. These again were kind of our most common ones and things that we see. But certainly would love to kind of talk about anything that's not here that we should be considering as we continue to talk today.
Okay, Lee, let's see what our attendees today had to say about this question.
All
Okay, so we
right.
had a few people jump on and answer this one. We appreciate it. So the question was, how do you relate to these business objectives? Excuse me. What else are you trying to achieve for your operation? Likely relatable, community buy-in is our greatest challenge. What are your thoughts on that specific
Mhm.
answer?
Yeah, so the one there, Jessica, was on how do we get buy-in, right? Is that what I heard
Yep.
maybe
So
summary
that's
across
our
the board?
greatest challenge, just getting the community buy-in.
Sure. Yeah, that's an excellent question. And, I think it's a challenge that's often probably underestimated across any number of our customers and what I've personally witnessed. So, one thing that I might suggest is, the first is figuring out how does your organization disseminate information, right? And how do you generally roll about change? So let me give you an example if I could. So in one of the first programs that I delivered as part of kind of a scaled rollout was across three or four primary different types of asset classes. So we had people who were at a facility level managing a building, right? So they would have a building that was a work center, for example, where you'd have trucks and an office space. And then you'd have another that was a high technology space. And then you had another that was office space only, right? And so what we had to do was, let's understand what the objectives are for each of those. Let's find within their organization a change champion that we can use to help disseminate the information, and then put together messaging that resonates with them across the board, right? And those might not always be sustainability related. Hopefully they're they're sustainability adjacent maybe, but the key is making sure that you're resonating with that audience.
Wonderful. And I know we have some other questions that are coming in, so I'm going to let you get back to the presentation and we'll go through some of the other questions later on.
Great. Okay. Perfect. Thank you. All right. So, all the things we've talked about so far, we kind of talked about what things are looking like in manufacturing today. What are some of the challenges? What are some of the objectives that we want to hit? And what are the users of energy in your facilities? So, I think what that kind of leads to, right, is there's a need across the industry to have a solution provider who can address all these things at once, right? And there's a lot. So how do you know that somebody has resources and expertise? How do you know that they have creative and flexible financing solutions? And then the data component, right? How do we know that we have the data in order to both validate, project outcomes, but also ensure that we're continuing to optimize our facilities? So what I'll do next is run through Redaptive, who's one of those providers that can offer those things. So the Redaptive is a full turnkey energy as a service provider, right? And our platform consists of three major areas that try to address the three primary needs that we see across the industry, which is capital, that was brought up earlier, resources, so people and knowledge, and data in order to verify the outcomes. So the three areas that Redaptive really focuses on are energy solutions, which is, energy as a service, if you will. So that's at scale funded project execution. So that incorporates the capital notion. We have global reach and expertise across a number of different technologies that's growing by the day. Additionally, we have the resources from program management to maintenance that allows us to manage a full life cycle of a project. As part of energy solutions, but also standalone, we offer data solutions. So Redaptive has a proprietary electric meter that we provide for our customers, as well as gas and water meters that allow us to do measurement and verification, M&V, of our programs, but also simplifying compliance reporting and building and equipment insights. And lastly, financing solutions, which really fit into energy solutions as well. So we provide financing solutions across energy as a service, power generation, so think PPA type financing, equipment financing for energy related assets, and asset remarketing, which we'll get into further detail here in just a second. All right, so moving on to energy as a service. As I mentioned at a high level, energy as a service to Redaptive is a fully funded end-to-end energy and sustainability solution that provides manufacturing customers energy efficiency programs and energy and sustainability related programs at scale. So think many sites at once and not single at a time. So we provide, again, the financial investment resources, measurement and verification, ongoing maintenance across all of these different areas listed here. So lighting, solar storage, EV, HVAC, facility optimization, both kind of from a central plant standpoint, so big heavy equipment, as well as decentralized systems. On the data front, Redaptive provides, again, data solutions for manufacturing specifically, and also for all of our other industries that enable us to provide measurement and verification of our installed solutions, but also help you with reporting. Sometimes it's difficult to get the information you need to comply with all the new reporting requirements. So quickly, how does our metering work? We have both a building level and an asset level electric meter, and building level gas and water meter. So we collect data for each of those meters. Each one has a cellular broadcasting capability, so we do not have to connect to local IT setups in order to provide data to the cloud. Redaptive is using AI as well as continued data science expertise to do data cleansing and aggregation. And then we share that information with you through our software, which is called Redaptive One. And lastly, on the financing solutions, again, we covered some of these, but as a service financing is Redaptive enabling our projects at scale for energy as a service. And that is typically done at a cost of capital that is less than what our customers often have for a weighted average cost of capital. Additionally, we offer power generation financing, as I mentioned, PPAs, equipment financing for any number of types of assets, and remarketing, which is focused on kind of the resale of manufacturing equipment in the marketplace. All right, so that's the quick intro on Redaptive. So as we move on to the meat of what I think you all showed up for today, is how do we actually do this in practice? So how does energy as a service enable accelerated scale, and how do we do more faster across the manufacturing space? So the next handful of slides will go through this approach. So first of all, the important thing to consider about energy as a service, and I think as we as an industry move to this broader approach, is we have to shift our mindset from what's been done in the past, which is often kind of project by project type approach, and move to a program level approach where we think about the entire portfolio that's under management by any one of our customers, and address that entire portfolio at once. So getting beyond some of the thinking that has been going into sustainability and energy projects in the past around what's a simple payback, and how do we try to just get a single project through versus trying to do more at once. So if thinking about it in that lens, some of the main benefits of doing a portfolio approach is really getting to that scale, right? And you're able to reduce your long-term energy costs, right? You're able to shift non-core asset maintenance to a third party, meaning Redaptive or others, right? You're able to free up capital for core business investments. And what we often guide our customers towards is that when you're able to do that, and free up that capital for other investments, you can invest it back in the business and generate really strong returns that way, versus spending it on things that are not as core to your operation. Another big component is this idea of blending projects and locations for flexibility. So we're going to talk about that more here in the next slide, and I'll show you what I mean. Additionally, you can, even though you may not want to, have the option to apply CapEx to projects to help offset costs. Maybe there's a project that doesn't have a great ROI or has too long or too high of a cost associated. You can inject CapEx into an energy as a service project. Those two things do not have to be mutually exclusive. And lastly, it speeds up savings, right, and emissions cuts. So as I mentioned earlier, there are a number of corporate targets that are coming to fruition a lot sooner than people probably realized. And by doing things on a portfolio scale, you're able to speed up those savings and emissions reductions to meet those targets. And again, you compare and contrast that to a project by project approach, which is, limited by all the things many of you probably deal with today, right? Which is, do I have enough CapEx? How do I manage this in my site level P&L? How do I get internal approvals? And do I actually have the resources I need to go do these projects? One last thought before we move on to the other, is there's also an embedded benefit here that I'm sure everyone here is familiar with in other aspects of the business, which is when you do things at a portfolio scale, you get economies of scale that you can't do otherwise, right? So think about your ability to bulk purchase things that in the past you may be buying onesie twosie as you're trying to complete projects. All right, so moving on here. So I wanted to provide an example of what I mean by flexibility through asset location and asset mixing. So what you see on the screen here is something that Redaptive does often. And how I would categorize this is essentially an assessment, right, of a portfolio of locations. This is an illustrative example for one of our customers where we go and we look at every site in a portfolio and scope out what's the opportunity, right? What are the opportunities for energy and efficiency optimization, for things like that? And what that does is it allows us to have an idea across a portfolio of what we can address at once, right? So if you look at, just simply using the optimization opportunity box here, if you look at full being kind of the best opportunity, in a traditional site-by-site approach, you might say, okay, I will do site 1, site 2, site 3, site 4. And then the rest, you would say, okay, I'm not going to do any of these because they simply don't have enough opportunity for us to be able to address it. What you're able to do with energy as a service is to actually tackle all of these at once. So instead of taking that one by one approach, you say, I'm going to use this project to offset this project. Because maybe what you have in site 5 in this example is a low opportunity for optimization, but maybe there's a safety issue there. Maybe there's an interruption in your production operation there because of something that's not working well. So there might be other reasons to do it. And by blending across these, you're able to achieve reductions across the board versus only attacking the high return projects at once. So what does that translate to? Whoops, and sorry, let me delete those annotations here. All right. So what does that mean as far as an outcome? So here's an example of what we talk about with our customers when you look at the value of scale. And what you'll see is that when you look at many projects at once, first of all, the dollars involved get a lot more significant to the bottom line. So you're able to bundle savings across any number of locations that generate significant returns, both on a year by year basis, but also over the useful life of the equipment and, let's say a 10-year, or in this case, a 7 and 8 year term. So what you see here is by doing things in an energy as a service portfolio approach, you're able to take what you had as individual spend in any given year and reduce that, and a portion is net savings, and the other portion is a payment for energy as a service. And that allows you to do more at once and generate savings from day one, versus what happens in a CapEx approach, where you have a big cash outflow right in year zero, followed by savings over time, which is why you often see those simple payback and ROI requirements. And lastly, because I want to make sure we've got enough time for questions here, I know there's a few in. I wanted to just give a couple of examples where Redaptive has done this in practice and where you can see it happening in manufacturing. So this is a case study from a current customer that we're actively working on. And what you'll see here is this is a packaging manufacturer, and the enterprise had a challenge of meeting very, very specific and near-term GHG and carbon reduction goals that they simply didn't have the capital to do. They were trying to address individual projects, but didn't have the ability to get anything done across a broader scale, because of a number of different things like decentralized decision making, capital availability, planning, timelines, etc. So what we were able to do is look at their entire portfolio and deliver a mix of different types of efficiency projects across their portfolio that are going to immediately impact their bottom line and help them get all the way to their greenhouse gas reduction goals. And this is doing lighting, HVAC, and we're looking at solar as well in the next month or two. And then second example here is of a life science manufacturer and supplier. Again, a huge capital investment avoided, and they had similar issues where they simply didn't have the capital available to try and address their needs. And they too had very specific and near-term carbon reduction goals that they had to hit. So again, in a very similar fashion, Redaptive helped look at their entire portfolio of locations and identify nearly every manufacturing location they had with some form of energy optimization solution, whether that was lighting, HVAC, solar, etc. And as you can see, that's resulting in significant impacts over the next 10 years. All right, so with this last slide, and then we'll leave time for questions. I want to make sure we address those. So again, when you think about energy as a service and the scale that can happen, this is an area that we are extremely focused on, manufacturing, and we've had a lot of experience here. As I mentioned, I personally have, but so have many of our other employees. So we have dealt with work scheduled around facility hours, right? You can't shut down during the middle of operations. That might mean doing work on nights and weekends, or over the holidays. We've had a lot of experience doing that with our customers. You can't disrupt the operations, right? That is the single biggest thing that's driving revenue. We can't impact it. And how do we help with the employee and customer experience in the plants, right? We have experienced that too, where you've had some locations that don't have good working conditions simply because of outdated equipment and lack of capital. And lastly, again, providing an avenue for providing capital and being able to cover the costs of projects with savings that are generated, um, which makes it a lot easier to scale across the board. All right, so with that, I would like to move into questions and hopefully answer anything you may have. Thank you all for listening.
Yes, no, thank you. And thank you for the feedback that we're already receiving. And we are absolutely thrilled to be getting on with everybody. And just as a reminder, I did in the chat respond to let somebody know that if we don't get a chance to answer questions today because of time, Lee's team will follow up with you. So don't worry if you ask a question and it doesn't get answered, you will have an answer sooner than later. Lee, thank you for all of the detail you put into the presentation, but let's get started with these Q&As. So, how can manufacturers effectively prioritize operational upgrades to optimize utility expenses while managing equipment breakdowns and other critical issues? And that's a mouthful.
Yeah, that's a big, heavy loaded question, but that's okay. Yeah, so I think the answer to that question is, and to try to perhaps reiterate the question is, how do I think about prioritizing what I can do to optimize energy while not disrupting my operations, right? And if you think back to the slide I was showing about the different areas of energy consumption in a typical manufacturing facility, I would say focus on those non-process pieces initially because those are easier to address without interrupting the operations. Right, so think about things like lighting, facility HVAC, again, on-site, solar, things like that you can address. The second is you do eventually have to address the process equipment, right? Like that is the core of the energy consumption. So, part of what we've done with customers is think about what, how do we plan around resiliency so that we can address those pieces of process equipment? And B, when do you have, like, let's remove all the other barriers. Let's say you have capital, you have the approval, you've got consensus to go do it. When do you have downtime that you can address those types of upgrades? So are there things that you can immediately attack the next time you have a shutdown or a slow production time so that you can address those?
Oh, that definitely makes sense. And I want to stay on the topic of capital. So, capital constrained environment. I think everybody's feeling the pinch, whether you're a small facility or a large facility. So,
Yeah.
how can organizations rethink their financial models to prioritize energy saving projects without compromising other critical investments?
Yeah. I mean, I would say I'm obviously a little bit biased, given my role, but I think the big thing is you have to be willing to consider third-party investment, because I mean, it's not just Redaptive, right? There are others that do it too, and you have to be willing to use somebody else's money to help get some of that done, because oftentimes you're not able to get that internal capital to go do a project. The other is one thing that can be done is how do I think outside of a site level P&L, right? So one thing that I've talked to some of our customers about is maybe there's a world in which we start to take energy budgets out of a site level P&L and put them at a corporate level, for manufacturing customers too, so that things can be done at a corporate level, enabling that broader scale and the reductions on the energy side.
No, that definitely makes sense. Now, what have been some of the bigger concerns that you have seen from your clients in terms of talking to them about utilizing a third party to help with the costs? Because I'm sure there are a multitude of individual concerns as well as entire system concerns. So I'd love to hear, and I'm sure that's a question that other people on the webinar have too, is,
Sure.
what's are there drawbacks? What are the big concerns?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question, Jessica. So there are a couple things that come to mind that I've seen. One is I think simply a bit of misconception, right? That it's not a viable alternative and that it's super expensive. So that leads to the second one, which is a lot of times you will hear, well, that capital is too expensive. One of the things that we specifically try to do is to make it as competitive with a customer's cost of capital as we can. But sometimes people confuse debt and equity, right, and keep them separate versus looking at what it actually costs to fund projects with CapEx. Um, and so you have to be able to look at that weighted average of the two to compare it to uh, third-party financing. And the last one, I think, Jessica, sometimes is simply duration and the counterparty, right? You have many of our customers, I assume many of you on the phone, you're long, well tenured businesses, and you're like, am I gonna get funding from somebody who's not been around, right? Or hasn't been here, and do I have to really do that for 7, 8, 9, 10 years? And the way that we try to mitigate that is our backers are long tenured companies and financial institutions as well. So it's important to kind of look at that whole value chain, if you will, to understand who are you buying from and who are they backed by so that you can get that level of comfort.
No, level of comfort. Everyone wants to be able to to feel that and experience that.
Yeah.
And actually, we had a question that came in through the chat that I think is extremely valuable too. If you have a longer contract term, how do you account for technology advances that
Hmm,
occur during the life of the contract that the company may wish to upgrade to?
sure. So that's an excellent question. And thank you for asking it. So ironically, maybe let me answer with an example. So when I first started in this field, back in 2015. We did some of our first installations of lighting and advanced controls, right? And at that time, 2015, it was the most advanced things we have. And turns out right now, in fact, in the last year and 2 years, some of those 8, 9, 10-year contracts with our customer expired. And the same question came up, which is like, how do I address what may have happened? And I tell you what, I never thought I would have to deal with that, first of all. But secondly, what the way that we approach it is, you try to give the most advanced thing that is possible for the budget you're kind of dealing with at the time. And in some of our programs that we've done, we build in a bit of an allowance for something exactly like this to say, hey, we know that those whatever it is, those VFDs that we put on your rooftop units might be not the same thing that you're going to get in 7 years from now. So let's build in a buffer to go replace them during that term. Um, so that's how we address it sometimes. Is just trying to build in an estimated buffer to allow for those advances. Um,
Yeah, I was gonna say, and that's with any project, no matter what type of project that you're implementing, from technology to house building, there's always gotta be a contingency, a buffer in there to,
it
because things
is,
are gonna come up and things are gonna change. So,
yeah.
no, thank you for that. I know
Mhm.
we are running out of time. I want to try to get to at least two more questions. This next one's going to be a bit of a mouthful as well. So again, thank you for the attendees for submitting them. In what ways can manufacturers shift from reactive energy management, so focused on immediate needs like breakdowns, to proactive energy strategies that future proof their operations against energy volatility and regulatory changes?
All right, reactive to proactive. How do I shift that mindset, I think, is kind of what I'm gathering to deal
Mhm.
with all the things that are happening in energy.
Yes.
Um,
It's a loaded question, I'm aware.
yeah, yeah, which is fine. So I think that the best guidance I can give folks is, when you're making that shift is again, I think you have to be willing to number one, look at a longer term return on investment, right? Think about the future of an investment in 10 years and not just a 3-year or 5-year time horizon, right? So that's one thought is when you're dealing with reactive, right, you're in the mode of now I have an emergency. And what happens is that ends up being the most expensive way you can address issues, right? Because when you have to have somebody come in, let's say, because it always happens, right? It's midnight, somebody needs to come in and go fix your whatever it is, your chiller that's providing cooled water to something, right? That's running in your operation. That means your line might be down. So you have to be able to look at a longer term option for doing that. Because if you go in and say, okay, well, instead of being reactive, I'm going to create some resiliency and I'm going to try to install something new today so I don't have to deal with the break fix. You need to look at that over a longer time horizon and make sure that you're thinking about that whole business case, right? With every single cost that's input into that reactive approach, meaning production output, meaning cost of energy, meaning cost of break fix type repair, labor and equipment, all those types of things.
No, very, very good sound advice there. And I think this is a perfect question to end on. So what emerging trends are you seeing in the energy management that could benefit manufacturers in the near future?
Sure. What emerging trends are we seeing that can help manufacturers in the future? One is I'm seeing more in the marketplace as far as kind of technologies and strategies that are trying to get to the asset level consumption and uptime, if you will, of equipment, and trying to get that data in the hands of manufacturers, so that you can know when things are working and when they're not. Right? There's been building automation systems. There's been management systems, all those types of things for many, many, many years. But it seems like in the last couple of years, there's been a lot more focus on getting that granular data to really help drive decision makings more proactively, as we were just talking about, which hasn't happened in the past. That's kind of one that I've seen across the board. Um, Maybe the last one to end on is, again, the trend that more and more customers of ours and companies across the manufacturing industry are having to deal with um, these various uh, extreme weather events, right? That then are kind of forcing us to start thinking about things like resiliency that I don't think were there before. You may, depending on your industry, you've probably been thinking about resiliency, don't get me wrong, but not in the same way you are having to think about it today. Which again, I think to everyone's benefit here, that kind of forces a proactive thought process, which is I think where you want to be.
Exactly. No, I think that was a perfect way to end. And I want to thank you, Lee, for your time today, as well as your insights and expertise. It's been a wonderful conversation. And thank you to your team at Redaptive. We look forward to the next event. A couple reminders for attendees. This is going to be available on demand. When we end today, there will be a survey that pops up. We appreciate any and all feedback that you can provide. For us, it helps us plan future webinars as well as improve on anything that you would like to see. And again, there will be a copy of the slide deck emailed to you post-event too by the team at Redaptive. So thank you for being on with us today, and we hope everyone has a wonderful rest of the day.
Thanks so much, Jessica. Thank you all.
Yeah.
Take care.